Hey, everybody, welcome. Today, we're going to be chatting a little bit about how to make your work experience bullet points on your resume actually good. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of different things that we're going to look at today in terms of making sure that the bullet points underneath all the work experience sections in your resume that talk all about all your amazing professional accomplishments are clear, are concise, catch people's attention, communicate effectively what an amazing professional you are, and most importantly, make you look so much better than anybody else who else has applied to the job so that they call you and not them. Okay, so this is part of a series of videos. We already did part one where we looked at the WIMD member that we've named Rebecca McAwesome, or maybe she was Rebecca McAwesome Sauce. We might have changed her name. Anyways, Rebecca McAwesome's resume. So in our last video, which we'll link down in the description, you saw us talk a lot about how to format it so that it was a little bit easier for a hiring manager or recruiter to read, and it kept inviting them to read down the page. So I've already covered that, and you can check that out in this video. So today I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to start kind of where we left off with Rebecca's resume last time. So this is what it looked like. We transformed it into this like a little bit kind of boring format, but at least a little more readable, a little more white space. Okay. So from here, we're going to start looking at just the bullet points here under her job as surgical sales territory manager at Medical Medicine Co. Um, so in here, the first thing that I want to do initially when I start looking at resume bullet points is think about what's important. So in our last video, we talked a little bit about the F-shaped reading pattern. So for those of you who don't remember, who haven't watched that video yet, the F-shaped reading pattern is a UX thing about how people consume content on the internet. Applies to resumes too. And it basically says that people, when they're presented with, a page of web content or a page of resume, tend to read things in kind of an F-shaped pattern. So they read starting at the left and the top, a lot all the way across the line for a few lines, and then they sort of skim, mostly focused on the left-hand side of lines, especially starting at every little heading. So that's sort of the general pattern. So what that means is that the most important things in your resume need to be near the top of the resume and towards the left, because that's the place where the eyes are most. So we need the most eye-catching, important details there. Now, we talked in our last video about how that means that the first sort of quarter to one half of the actual page on your resume is the most important real estate. But you actually get a refresh of that F-shaped reading pattern with every single header. So what that means is that here under work history and under Medical Medicine Co. and whatever other companies, every single time you switch companies, you get a new kind of fresh F shape running across your resume where you'll again get them to have like a refreshed burst of reading and read in a little more detail for the first few things. So we want to put the most important eye-catching things in our work history up near the top of the list, right? So of all of these different bullet points here, we want to put the most interesting things up near the top. So what I've got here, we're going to do this sort of like an old school cooking network show where I've pre-prepared the dish and I reveal it as I go, so you don't have to sit and watch me chop onions or edit a resume all day. So I'm going to show you, I've taken this resume as we left it, and I've highlighted in bold green every single thing on here that's like particularly interesting to a hiring manager. So let's take a look. So these are the things in this resume that are like, ooh, interesting. Okay, I want to know about that. Now, what do you notice? The first line is got some green in it. That's good. But where's all the rest of the green? It's like halfway down the page, right? It's not even up near the top. And so one of the first interventions that we want to make to this resume is taking all these bullet points that have these lovely green highlights in them and just like moving them up to the top. So, like our cookbook style or our cooking show style resume video we're going to do, I've got another little file here that's done that. Okay, so here these are all up at the top, right? We've got all the green bullet points up near the top, and now we're going to start to get into some of the detail because we've already put the important stuff near the top. And so it's time to actually get into what they say. So I, again, have got this cookbook format, and I'm going to share half a screen of the final version, which I have here over on the right. And the other half is going to be the version that we're going to work through. And I'm going to show you how we get from point A to point B. Perfect. Okay, so let's start with bullet point number one. So here on the left, where we started with Rebecca McAwesome's resume, we've got led a team of technology specialists and manage a $5.3 million territory with over 200 customer accounts. Excellent. Now, what do we notice about this green thing here? The green thing is at the back end of the sentence, right? Remember we talked about that F, we want to go up and we want to go to the left. So an important thing that I want all of you to remember is not only should the important stuff be at the top, But the important stuff should be at the very beginning of the sentence, at the very beginning of the bullet point. So here we have a problem because managed a $5.3 million territory with 200 customer accounts is way more interesting than led a team of specialists, right? So either when we have a bullet point like this, we want to reverse the order. So the important and interesting thing comes first, or we want to split it up into two bullet points. In this case, leading a team of technology specialists and managing this territory, they're kind of separate things. So what I actually want to do here is I'm just going to take this first half of this bullet point of led a team of technology specialists, and I'm just going to dump it way further down the page. We'll come back a little later to why I'm making that decision, but for now, I just want to make sure that this $5.3 million territory is front and center, right? So now that's standalone, its own bullet point. It's eye catching. We don't have anything to pull focus from what we want to draw attention to. Now, something I want to say that Rebecca has done really well in her original resume that most of my clients struggle with a little bit is Rebecca's done a really, really good job of quantifying her achievements, right? This tends to be a little bit easier in sales. You tend to know your sales figures, but she's done really well, right? So we've got a lot of dollar signs, $5.3 million. We know how many customers, 200 customer accounts, right? You can see down here, there's percentages, reversing negative growth within 2 quarters. So she's really not just saying that she's done a good thing, she's substantiating that with data. So anytime you can substantiate your claims with data on a resume, that's a really good thing. And that's part of why I want this so high on the resume because it's hard to argue, right? Oh, $5.3 million is how big your territory was. Seems legit, right? So always include quantifiable metrics about your results. And this is very results focused and it's a quantifiable metric, which is part of why it's up at the top. Right. So that one's looking good now that we've sort of edited out that led a team of technology specialist piece and moved it down to the bottom so that the main thing can shine. Let's take a look at the second bullet point. So our second bullet point here says, drove sales to achieve an 8.4% CAGR over 4 years, including 2 years within the COVID pandemic. Okay, so this one was really interesting. And I spent a lot of time talking with Rebecca about this when we went through the resume, because on its own, it's not a bad bullet point, right? Like this is good. 8.4% is a good number. It's over 4 years. It's clear that it wasn't a flash in the pan. I really, really like that. But she and I, talked about this bullet point as we talk about every single bullet point. And what I discovered when we talked about it is that, like is the case many times, there was actually an even better story hiding in this. So you take a look here at the bullet point on the right, which is the one that we ended up with. We wrote drove sales to achieve a 14% CAGR from 2018 to 2020 versus 6% industry average. So there's two things that are going on here. So let's start with the easy thing. There's versus 6% industry average. Basically, what we're doing here is we're contextualizing a number that's a huge win, right? Some numbers, like $5.3 million, are big to anybody who reads them, right? But a 14% CAGR might mean something to a sales manager boss, but if you've got an HR person screening this, they don't know what the hell a CAGR even is, right? And they don't know if 14% is good. Should CAGRs be 90%? Should they be 4%? They probably don't know. And so when we can add this little bit of extra context versus 6% industry average, suddenly, even if I don't even know what you're talking about, I'm like, oh, wow, double industry average or better? Now I'm interested in calling this woman back, right? So this versus 6% industry average has done a little bit of contextualizing that helps translate, one, the resume for lay people who may be viewing it, but also two, remind experienced people, oh yeah, that is a really good number, just in case they forgot. So I really like being able to add a little bit of context like this, especially if we can do it with very few words. So it's kind of economical and doesn't take up 4 lines of text on the page or anything like that. I really like that. Now, the other thing that you'll notice about the change we made here is that before it said she had an 8.4% CAGR, whereas now she's got 14. So this is a shorter time period, right? 14% CAGR from 2018 to 2020. Part of what happened in the COVID pandemic for everybody in most industries is if the business was doing really well and sales were up and doing great, as soon as the pandemic hit in March 2020, everyone went into a full panic and, all the revenue fell off the books for a couple of months, right? And so what Rebecca, her revenue rather, went up, giant crash for 6 months, and then came back up. So when you looked over the 4 years from 2018 to 2022, when she made this resume, overall, she'd done 8.4, which is still better than that 6% industry average, right? But by quoting that really long average, she'd sort of priced in that 6 months of negative growth of zero revenue. You know what I mean? And so what I chose to do here is kind of cut off before 2020 so I could show an even more impressive number. Now, some people will be more impressed by the higher overall CAGR number. Some people will be impressed by that longer sustaining 8.4%, which is still above average. It's up to you how you want to display this. I've made a choice in this moment to go, I'm going to go for the eye popping higher number. Both are valid, but this is just a different way to display it. And it's a really important thing for you to think about. It's like, how do I display my quantifiable data to its best possible advantage? If you increased sales by $20,000, did you increase them by $20,000 or did you grow sales by 30% year over year or something like that, right? 30% year over year is probably more impressive than $20,000. Whereas, if you're talking about a 4% revenue increase, but that works out to 6.5 million, that's more interesting, right? So you want to think about, are you presenting things as percentages or are you think presenting things as numbers? And you also want to think about if you're presenting things as percentages, where should you be cutting that time frame off to make it seem most impressive? All right. So that's bullet point number 2. Now, let's take a look here at bullet point number 3. So, for bullet point number 3, we've got increased market share by acquiring new B2B institutional accounts and successfully onboarded 3 new hires, expanding the team from 3 to 6. Okay, cool. So, the great thing about this bullet point is, like we talked about earlier, the green part, the part we like, is at the beginning. Amazing. I love that. I'm already happy to see that. But this is sort of 2 bullet points smushed together, very similar to how bullet point 1 is, right? We've got the fact that she increased market share, and then we also have that she grew the team. So my preference always is to take these 2 separate sort of skills or achievements and put them in their own buckets. Let's not mash them together. Let's not divert people's attention, split it between these 2 things. Let's make these totally separate. So what I've done over here is I've basically just cut this last part, the onboarding 3 new hires and expanding the team from 3 to 6, and I've moved it elsewhere. So you remember that we kind of moved that earlier bullet point around led a team of technology specialists. I'm going to put this down there because there's sort of a theme emerging of, team leadership related items. This is probably going to go kind of in that section of the resume, and I'm going to let this increased market share thing stand by itself. So let me cut this and we'll just dump it down here for now. We're going to come back to this and make it look good. Okay, now let's talk about the other difference here. So we've got increased market share by acquiring new B2B institutional accounts. So I don't know about y'all, but when I read B2B institutional accounts, I don't really know what that means, right? So Rebecca and I had a long conversation about that. Like, what do you mean by B2B institutional accounts, right? So for Rebecca, selling, effectively medicine in Canada, what that means is she's selling sort of into quasi-governmental or even governmental organizations, right? She's selling into big hospitals and things like that. And so they're quite bureaucratic. They're notoriously complex to sell into. This is not like selling to a small mom and pop shop down the street. This is a very big thing. And so what we talked about is whether or not that particular language around institutional accounts would resonate for the kind of role she'd be going for, because she wasn't necessarily very likely to be once again selling into hospitals unless she got almost an identical job to what she had before. She wanted to move into the tech industry and start selling software way outside of, hospitals and government and stuff like that. So we said basically this is very, very similar to selling enterprise, like i.e. selling to really large companies, right? So we kind of recharacterize these institutional accounts that she was talking about here as basically enterprise accounts, because it's the same, very similar sales motion, sales cycle, where you have these really, consultative, long sales cycle deals that are complex. It takes a pretty experienced salesperson who's done enterprise type work to do that kind of work. And so we wanted to use that special keyword that resonated in the market that she was going for to help translate her old experience as a transferable skill. So we've just switched out some language here to highlight that transferable skill. Now, the other thing eagle-eyed people will have noticed that we did here is, of course, we've quantified this, right? We didn't just increase market share, now we increased it by $400,000. Right. Add a little bit of quantification. This makes it sound just like a little bit more elevated. Okay. Now, let's talk about not just the next bullet point, but the next several bullet points. So these ones here, as Rebecca and I talked about this resume, what became clear is that these 4 bullet points are actually very similar. So you can see on the right-hand side over here that what we've done is we've actually created these as a sub bullet point. We've kind of themed them together with one large main bullet point on top. And then we said, and these were all part of that kind of project or theme. So these 4 bullet points here, we've kind of grouped them underneath this heading that says, used a strategic data focused approach to create revenue growing campaigns and initiatives, right? So the frame that we're putting around all 4 of these things is I was strategic and I looked at data and I earned us money, right? All 3 things that companies love. So I'm going to pull this over here and just kind of replicate this formatting on this side. So this will be a little bit easier for y'all to track as we talk about each of these bullet points here. Okay. All right. So we've done that. And part of the reason we clump things together like this under sort of themes is because it can help make your resume a little more readable. We talked about that F-shaped pattern. You'll get a little mini F here because of the sub bullet point. We also create a little variety in the white space, so it makes it easier for your eyes to engage. And it helps folks understand the kind of significance or framing of each of these 4 things. So I'm a big fan of sub bullet pointing in resumes. I do them on most resumes that I come to work with, not every single one, but I think they're a really useful tool. It can be helpful for you to kind of be able to talk about 6 or 7 achievements, maybe not 6 or 7, but like 3 or 4 achievements from one big project without having a bullet point that's like 4 lines long on your resume. Instead, it can be a single line and then bullet point achievement, bullet point achievement, bullet point achievement, bullet point achievement. So I think it's a really good approach. So highly recommend using these sub bullet points when you can, just a little formatting nerd stuff. But let's get into these individual bullet points. Okay, so our very first bullet point here, created a biannual outbound prospecting campaign to engage with hospital directors regarding capital equipment needs, generating 50% more opportunities than previous years. Okay, so I'm sounding like a broken record, friends, but we already know what the first thing is going to be, right? The important thing is at the end of the sentence. So we're going to take generated 50% more opportunities than previous years, an amazing achievement that I want to highlight. We're not going to hide that at the bottom of the bullet point where nobody's going to read it, right? Like if you start the sentence on created a biannual outbound prospect, I've already given up. I'm never going to find out about your 50% more opportunities than previous years. We got to get it up front where someone can read that, right? Okay, so let's put this up. Okay, and then, by creating, right? Okay, so generated 50% more opportunities than previous years. Love it already. And then let's look at the back half. So, what Rebecca McAwesome had initially was by creating a biannual outbound prospecting campaign to engage with hospital directors regarding capital equipment needs. So, one thing I noticed about this immediately is we're talking about hospital directors. So, again, we're back in that specificity. If Rebecca was building a resume that was going to get her a job working in medical sales again, perfect. Would leave it exactly as it is. Given that she wants to move into tech and sort of SaaS sales, I want to cut all this hospital medical language as much as I can so that she seems more like she's got what they're looking for and not like a slightly different version of what they're looking for, right? So here, I'm going to take away this idea of hospital directors, but I also wonder whether there's a way to make all of this a little bit simpler, right? Because right now it's long, it's wordy, it's a bit hard to parse. And it's like, okay, so you were engaging with them around their capital equipment needs. Why is that desirable? Like, if I'm the manager reading this, why do I want to hire somebody who's engaged with maybe even decision makers about capital equipment needs, right? So Rebecca and I had a long conversation about this, and it turns out that capital equipment purchasing decisions are made well in advance, right? Like once a year, you go and define your budget for your major expenditures that year. And if you, as a salesperson, don't get your proposal in front of the person defining the budget before that budget gets proposed and approved, let's imagine instead they propose and approve their budget. And then 2 months later, you're like, hi, have I got $1 million thing for you to buy? They'd be like, cool beans. Why don't we do it next year when I've got the budget, right? And so it can really slow down your sales cycle. So really what she was doing when she created this biannual outbound campaign about capital equipment needs is she was trying to catch them in their sales cycle so that she wouldn't find herself 2 months behind an approved budget with no ability to make a sale for another 10 months, right? So That is something that an enterprise customer is going to have problems with as well, right? This is really, really common. And so, what we did here with this bullet point is we, again, just translated this into language that A, would resonate more with the target that she was looking for. And then B, talked about it more in terms of the outcome, right? So we talk about here aligning with customer sales cycles, and that's the focus. Whereas opposed to here, it was creating a biannual campaign. So tiny changes here, changing the emphasis, making it seem more industry agnostic and a little more enterprisey, and then moving the important part to the beginning. Great. So let's take a look now at the second bullet point. So this one suffers from the same thing as the first one, right? Important thing at the end. We've got pioneered a semi-monthly report that simplified sales trends into daily objectives for team members, increasing motivation and reversing negative growth within 2 quarters. Okay, so the headline obviously is reversing negative growth within 2 quarters. That's amazing. Any person running a sales org wants somebody who can pull out of a tailspin and start making money. So we love that. So obviously, we're going to move that up to the front like we did here, right? And then let's take a look at how she's described the work that she did. So she talks about pioneering a semi-monthly report that simplifies sales trends into daily objective for team members, increasing motivation. So the main result, other than the negative growth in 2 quarters piece, but when you look at the back half of the sentence, the main result that she is trying to show off here is that the team is more motivated. But that's not actually, I would argue, that's not actually the best outcome that came from this, other than reversing the negative growth. Like here, what she actually did was, as we wrote it on the side, is she looked at customer data, right? That was what was in the monthly report, these simplified sales trends. She looked at customer data, found opportunities, and then helped focus the team on only the most high impact, high value deals. So they weren't just wasting time pursuing small fish. Instead, they could go after the deals that they were likely to win that would be big dollar values. That was the point of this semi-monthly report that she did. But the way that it's written over here, she said it sounds really clerical. Oh, she did report writing to increase motivation. So there's not a lot of people, like, I'm not saying there's all, but if your bullet point on your resume boils down to printed reports to keep team happy, that's not going to make you as much money or make you as desirable a hire as analyzed data, identified opportunities, created focus, and drove high impact, high value deals. All of those things are more interested than can print report, can keep coworkers happy, right? So it's really important when you're writing your bullet points, you want them to be results focused, but you want to make sure that the results that you're focusing on are the really crucial ones to the business. So those of you who've been around with me for a long time will have heard me talk about the business alien. So the business alien is a technique that we use to help understand whether what we're talking about is really focused on the core business needs enough, right? So the core business needs that we tell the business alien about are making more money, spending less money, and reducing the risk of being able to make more money or spend less money. If you're doing those things, or if you're doing something really close to those things, then you're probably messaging well. You'll notice printing reports, making team happy is nowhere on that list of 3 things, right? So it's really, really important for us to present our work as close as possible to those 3 business goals as we can to make it seem shinier and more interesting to the folks who would hire us. Okay, so that's what we did with this bullet point. Now, the next 2 bullet points here, I actually don't dislike the way that they are. I think that this next bullet point created detailed customer-specific trend analysis for supervisors and identified sales improvement opportunities based on results. I could keep this, or it's quite similar now to the bullet point above it. I might choose to get rid of it. I'm not upset about keeping it. It could go either way. And then this other one here, launched an email newsletter that updated team members on new product availability, competitor developments, segment market trends, and customer feedback. So this is a good thing that Rebecca's done, right? Where she's basically keeping her team, the people who have to go out and sell, up to date on what products are available, how do we talk about them with our competitors, where's the market trending, how are customers happy or not? All those things are really important for a sales rep to have current, regular information about, right? So she's got this email newsletter internally that helps them learn that. I think in general, that's a pretty good bullet point. It wouldn't be a bullet point that I put up at the top. I think she's done a lot of things that are more important than that, but I do think it's helpful. I might, if I had a little more time to fuss around this, we're sort of in, draft one phase here. If I had a little more time to fuss around this, I might play with the wording around launched an email newsletter, because again, it sounds very clerical, but in general, I think this is a perfectly fine thing for her to have on her resume. Now, you'll notice that some of these things on this resume are really achievement focused, right? Like $5.3 million territory, 14% CAGR, increased market share by $400,000, right? They're really quantifiable. They have a clear result. Other ones are a little more skills based or workhorse task based, right? These last two bullet points that we've been talking about here, these are a little more on the sort of skills task side of the spectrum. It's not a bad thing for you to have them. In general, I want most of your resume, especially the top part of your work history, to be really focused on results that you've created, not just things that you've done. So I don't want your resume to read like made outbound phone calls, wrote proposals, closed sales, negotiated with clients. I do want to know that you can do those things, but up top, you should be saying, close this many in sales, led a team of this size, manage a territory like this. Um, and then some of those skills bullet points, like we're trying to get into here, can go a little bit later in the resume because you do need to substantiate that you have those skills. But we want to see the achievements first. Otherwise, it just seems like you haven't achieved anything. Okay, so those are good. Now, let's take a look at all the stuff that I've been dumping down here, these 3 bullet points. So these are the 3 bullet points that are sort of about the team leadership that she's done, right? Leading a team of technology specialists. These are the ones that we've pulled from the bullet points earlier. So this is another good case where I'm going to turn these into a sub-bullet pointed list, just like we've done on the right. So I want to take this first one, led a team of technology specialists. I'm going to quantify that, 6 of them, right? And then I'm going to make that my primary bullet point, and I'm going to sub bullet point the other 2. Now, within every sub bullet point list that you do, it's important to, just like we do with the whole resume and just like we do within our individual work histories, we want to again put the important stuff at the top. So we've got 2 bullet points here. One says successfully onboarded 3 new hires, expanding the team from 3 to 6. And the other one says coach team members on best practices for qualifying leads, generating high quality demo meetings, communicating new product value props, and overcoming objections. Between these 2, I would argue that the second one about coaching the team members is probably a little more important or a little more interesting to somebody reading this resume. Onboarding, which the other one is talking about, is like, it's not that complicated. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying there's not an art to onboarding. I think there really is, but it's really generally viewed as kind of table stakes. Like nobody's really out there going, I want to hire my next new sales manager, but only if they're really good at onboarding, right? But they will care if you're really good at coaching your team because your team is what you're going to use to drive the results, right? So I think this is a more important bullet point, and I would tend to put it first on the list. Okay. And then I would basically leave these as they are. You can see on the right-hand side, I've tightened up the language just a little bit here. And that's really just about trying to make this read a little bit shorter. But generally speaking, these are perfectly fine bullet points. And that last piece, leverage B2B selling strategies. This one is totally okay as well. This one could sit higher in the resume. For lack of a better spot, I've just kind of left it down here. We could play around with that a little bit more, but I think it's generally a good bullet point, and it's fine to leave it where it is. Now, one last thing I want to talk about here. So you'll notice if we just look, we'll make this bigger on the right so you can really see it. If you notice where we've gone with this resume, the whole top half of it is really about our kind of metrics and achievements and kind of business/strategy side of the leadership equation. The people side of the leadership equation, which is down here in these bullet points, we've relegated to the bottom. Now, depending what kind of job you're applying for or what type of company you're applying for, you might choose to put some of your team leadership stuff a little bit higher on the list. In general, my preference is to put it a little bit lower. I think it's mostly harder to substantiate, and people are usually hiring you. They want you to have leadership skills so that you can drive results on the team, meaning the results on the team is the thing they're actually after, as opposed to the excellent leadership is actually the thing they're after. It's a tool to get to the thing they want, which is really good performance from the team. So my general policy when I look at a resume then is to put the thing they want, the performance from the team, all these stats about how much money she made them, up at the top, and the leadership stuff a little bit lower on the list. But There are some folks who really want to see it the other way around. So if you feel strongly about it, or if you're applying to a company where, leadership is really in their ethos, like, I'm thinking of, I don't know if this really matches their internal culture, but like, somebody like a Lululemon where like they really live and breathe development, at least externally, they seem to care a lot about that. If you're working for a company that really has it that they care a lot about leadership, you might choose to put this a little bit higher. But generally speaking, I tend to put it a little bit lower on the list. Okay, friends. So we've been through a lot already. We've taken Rebecca McAwesome's resume from something a little bit less focused to something that I hope is a little more readable, a little clearer, and shows off her skills a little bit better with a little less confusion. So some of the key things that we talked about today are that F-shaped reading pattern. So important stuff to the top of the list of bullet points of experiences and important stuff to the front of the sentence. Always both of those things. We've also talked about leading with our results or our achievements as opposed to just the tasks that we've done, which Rebecca's actually done a relatively good job of here, even on her own before I got to this resume. We talked about quantifying things as much as we can, either using dollar signs or counts or percentages or improvements or amounts of time. She's got a good mix of all of these things. And I love for you to do this as much as you possibly can on your resume. It really helps substantiate the claims that you're making and make them feel real and grounded as opposed to just something that anybody could have typed on a resume. We talked about using sub bullet points to help increase readability, initiate kind of that fresh F shaped reading pattern, and also to provide sort of framing and focus to some of your bullet points. Those are the big ones that I want you to remember. Okay, so I hope this will be helpful to you in taking a first pass at your resume. There's still more yet that we could do with Rebecca's resume, but I think it's in way better shape than it used to be. If you want any help coming up with, picture perfect language that makes you sound like a, person who generates high impact, high value deals like we did on Rebecca's resume here, know that everything that we talked about in this video today and more to make your bullet points sound really good is something that I can help you with. So check out our resume services on wimdy.com and best of luck. Hope to see you soon. Okay, bye.